I'm here today with Ross Dolan of Immolation to talk about Acts of God, out February 18th on Nuclear Blast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you for taking the time and joining me on the channel to talk about the upcoming new record. And let's start off from the beginning, which is always the best way to start off a discussion.
Sure.
5 years since Atonement. What did those 5 years add to the making of this record?
Well, I think this album gave us more time, obviously, than we've had since probably the first or second record. So we had a lot more time to really absorb these songs and to create the album that you're hearing now. The writing process started in like 2018, you know. So by the time we were finished with the touring for Atonement, which was about December of 2019, we had wrapped up the whole Atonement cycle. And at that point, we had about 4 or 5 new songs. So we were kind of already ahead of the curve at that point. Usually for us, a lot of the writing and all of that stuff comes within a couple of months before the studio time. So we did get a jump start on it this time, luckily. You know, Atonement was a good album for us. It was very successful. We did a lot of touring for that. It was received really well. So coming off of Atonement, we knew we had to write something that was going to be darker and something that would at least be as good as Atonement. Atonement set the bar really high for us, I thought. So when we started, you know, the songwriting for this one, you know, Bob knew going into it, it was going to be a challenge. So let's just put it that way. So that being said, 2019 came around. We finished the touring cycle for Atonement, and we had planned originally to finish the writing for the new record and possibly get that recorded by 2020 and have the album out either 2020 or earlier this year. So obviously that didn't happen. The pandemic happened and everybody was kind of forced to stay home, and it allowed us more time to really absorb the songs, to craft the songs, you know, much better. It allowed us to be much tighter going into the studio for this session. And I think our drummer Steve probably benefited the most because he had more time to really create the drum patterns and the rhythms and all the cool little embellishments that he adds in, and without being rushed, without feeling the pressures of a deadline. So I think the extra time really allowed us to create a darker album that was very dynamic, each song is very unique on this record, I think, and it allowed us to create more songs, I think. So, you know, it was a longer period of time, but I think the fans will benefit because they'll have more songs. And I think all the songs on this record, in my opinion, are standalones. It was very hard to decide which songs we were going to roll out first. For example, it was very difficult to create a sequence, you know, a track order on the record, because, you know, a lot of good songs on this one, in my opinion. So you know, not a bad problem to have, but you know, it's again, it's something that you know, we've been listening to these songs, like I said, since 2018. So we're at the phase now where we're not listening to stuff as critically anymore, and we're able to kind of step away and enjoy them for what they are. But like I said to you earlier, it's really the first moment that we're actually getting feedback from other people other than us, you know, other people outside of our circle, you know. So it's been really rewarding in that sense, you know, to see that people really enjoy it so far, you know, at least the people that we've talked to up to this point in the last week or two. So like yourself. So that to me is like the biggest reward from this whole process, to kind of get that positive feedback, because we enjoy the record, but that doesn't mean the fans are going to enjoy the record. You know, we kind of write the songs, and, you know, when we get to a point where we're like, wow, this sounds good, we're happy with it, let's hope everybody else enjoys it. You know, that's all you can do is hope. So,
and you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting that you brought up, which is the amount of songs that the record has. This is the longest, biggest record you guys have ever released in terms of the length and amount of songs in it. Did that create problems for you guys with the track listing? How are you going to make this album be as fluid, as dynamic as possible for the listener that's going to sit down and go through it from beginning to end?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, and that doesn't get brought up a lot, but and like I mentioned earlier, deciding the sequential order of the songs, for the album is always challenging, and we always try to spend a lot of time because it's important. You want an album that flows great from start to finish. You don't want to have all your heavy hitters up front and then some slower stuff at the end, where you kind of lose interest. So it's very challenging to keep that interest, peaked throughout the whole record. So that, and the fact that we had, like you said, a lot more songs. We have 13 proper songs, and then we have 2 songs that are more like instrumental pieces that serve as like intros. But those are kind of like little mini songs, on their own. So yeah, 15 songs is a lot of material, but I think if you listen to the record, like, at least for me, it moves fast. Like, it goes a lot faster than you would think. And I think that's a good sign. It doesn't drag, So, I find myself, I listen to the whole record now, and then I'll get to the end and it'll start over, and I'll say to myself, wow, that was pretty quick. That was a quick 52 minutes. So, but
it does have that great mobility. It does have that feeling. The only thing I felt that perhaps could have made the experience even better was maybe a little bit of an interlude track in the middle of the record, breaking
Right.
side A to side B to kind of give the listener a little bit of a reprieve, a pause. Outside of that, the album moves extremely well, considering 15 songs, 52 minutes.
Yeah, the intro piece before the last song, before Apostle, and the Flames Wept, it's called, that little acoustic part, I originally kind of thought might work better somewhere in the middle, like you said, but when we started putting the songs together and figuring out a running order, it just kind of worked there because it set the tone for that song, I think. And to me, that was more important. It set up Apostle, and it's a very that instrumental piece is very, very dark, and it's kind of outer worldly. You know what I'm saying? It kind of takes you to a very weird place, and I like that about that song. So I thought it worked really well with Apostle because of what Apostle is about thematically. It worked for me, and but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, maybe something in the middle would have been cool, but I thought it worked better there. So,
No, for that song specifically, it's perfect there because they almost feel like just one song that you guys decided to break it apart and put an intro there. So if you're listening to on Spotify or whatever the case might be, you're able to just listen to the main track. But it really works well as part A and part B. The 2 songs come together.
Good. I'm glad you agree because that's what I thought. And I felt like, once I heard everything together, I felt like those 2 had to be together. And that was just kind of the weird thinking that went on in my head when I was imagining that.
Oh, when I was listening, I wasn't looking at the track listing. I actually thought they were the same song. And then
okay.
when the album was over, I was like, wait a minute, I don't think I heard all the songs. And then when I'm back, oh, this is just an instrumental intro here. Because it really played as itself to be just one longer track. That's kind of how it came across.
Cool. I'm glad that you thought that too, because that was kind of what I was imagining, and we were all kind of thinking that as well. So cool. I'm glad.
You mentioned the album being dark. I think this is the darkest record you guys have ever released. What pushed you guys into that direction of really creating a somber, dark record?
I think our fans know we've always gravitated more towards the darker sounds and the darker themes. It's just something that we enjoy. I think the darker stuff to me has always had more impact on me personally. I've always gravitated towards darker music, darker books, darker movies, anything that's darker, I enjoy. I just think, not that I'm a dark, miserable person, because I'm not, but I like that. It's a good balance. And let's face it, the last couple of years were very dark in a lot of ways for on a larger scale, on a personal scale for many people. It was a mind fuck this whole 2 years. So I think a lot of that kind of bled into the creation of this record for all of us. I guess it's where we were, in our headspace during that time. But I I think after Atonement, we wanted something that was darker, much darker than Atonement. Atonement was, like I said, it set the bar very high for us. So we knew moving forward, we wanted to create something that was as good as Atonement, at least strive towards that. And we wanted something that was darker. So I think we've achieved that. Bob really delivered 15 songs of probably some of his darkest ever, and I absolutely loved it. As each song would, be delivered to us, each time I listened to the song, the rough demo stuff, I would just love it. I was like a kid, like a 15-year-old kid getting a demo in the mail and say, oh, this is awesome. I love it. So, I was like a fanboy, for some of that stuff. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And, since it was such a dark time, to live through, this was the one thing that I got joy out of, was just, knowing, looking forward to like, wow, I can't wait to record these songs and finish them. And I looked forward. So I guess it gave us purpose during a very dark time. It gave us some kind of hope, and it gave us something to really focus on and work towards to keep our sanity.
It was something that's very important during these crazy times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just glad it kind of all came together the way it did, musically, lyrically, aesthetically, the look of it. So it couldn't have came out any better, in my opinion. This is exactly what we were imagining, man. So it finally happened.
And to me, when you talk about darkness and when you talk about this record, the immediate song that comes to my mind is Noose of Thorns. I mean,
Yes.
from a lyrical content perspective, the way you deliver the vocals, the soundscape, this is a song that's dripped. Like if you squeeze this song, like darkness comes out like sweat. You know what I mean? It's just pure darkness. That is one of those tracks that really showcases that feeling that you guys try to put together with the whole record.
Yeah. And you want to hear something funny? Noose of Thorns was the first song written for the record. Bob wrote that song first back in 2018. So that song almost set the tone for the rest of the record. When I heard that song, I was like, wow, you kind of outdid yourself with this song. It's a very dark song. And I love what you said, if you squeezed it, it would like, sweat like darkness, it's great line. I'm going to tell Bob that. He'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah, it totally felt like that. I mean, I was feeling the darkness of the record up until that point, but when that song hits, it's like you guys turned the knob, to use the Spinal Tap turn. You turned the knob of darkness all the way to 11 with that one. I was like, wow, I didn't think this could have gotten any darker, and here we are.
That's awesome. I'm glad you think so. I mean, because that was a song that kind of set the pace for the record, if you want to call it that. And that song specifically was one of the main inspirational points for the album cover. The first line of the song was the line that kind of drove that inspiration for the album cover. So I'm glad you enjoy that song. That's a very unique song on the record for me. The way it flows, the energy, the way it starts, it's very misleading the way it starts. It starts off very slow and very heavy, and then it just explodes and it just takes you on a crazy ride, but it is dark through and through.
Yeah, without a doubt. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this record is that it felt very visceral to me. It felt very organic. Like it didn't feel, and for me, death metal has to have that aspect to it. I don't like it if it's too overly produced, too overly polished. The fact that I'm hearing the songs and I can hear the fingers going through the strings of the guitars adds so much to the whole atmosphere, to that darkness that we've been talking about. Was that something that happened organically when you guys were putting things together, or did you guys have like a little bit of a game plan of how you wanted the sound on this album to come across?
I think our productions are different from record to record. But that being said, it is a constant evolution for us. We're always learning a little something from each session, prior to the newer session. So we take a little something from every session and we try to apply it, when we record a new record. So that being said, Zach Oren, who did the mixing and the mastering and made it sound as amazing as it does, he's had a couple of records now to kind of understand what we are and what we want to convey as a band. And that's important with a producer, to have someone who understands the vision, I guess, you know, band's vision, what we're trying to achieve through our music. And I think Zach has done a great job with all the records he's done with us. You know, the first one being Majesty and the K. You know, that was the first time we had a more modern edge production, if you want to call it that, without being overly produced. So for this record, you know, we wanted something, like you said, that had good production value where you could hear all the instruments.
Yeah.
But something that wasn't overly polished where you would lose the feeling and the vibe that we wanted to convey. So, you know, with this music, it's very difficult, you know, to kind of straddle that line and not kind of fall into either side. You know, you don't want it overproduced, but you don't want it underproduced. You know, you want to hear everything, but you don't want, you know, everything competing with each other. You know, so there's a really fine balance there. And I think for this one, we had about 8 or 9 rounds of mixes before we settled on what you're hearing, you know, as the final mix. And it took us a lot longer, man. We finished recording in the second week of August. We were finished. Everything was done. And we didn't have the final mix until the first week of October. So it took a long time, you know, back and forth with Zach. But I think at the end of the day, I think he fucking nailed it, man. I think he did a really good job. I think we're all very happy with the production. The sound of it is organic, but it still has a very good production value, I think. So I think it's the best of both worlds. So I'm happy to hear that you enjoy the production. We've been hearing a lot of that, which is very unusual for our camp. A lot of times people are very critical of our productions, you know, so we try to, you know, put all that in the hopper when we move forward and try to adjust and tweak as we go. But I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah, it kind of, like you said, it walked that fine line between giving you a clean sound, but at the same time still feeling organic, almost like we're in a jam session, listening to you guys just jamming out the songs. I think it's important. And that added to the volume that this record has, because this album has this big demolishing volume coming at you that just adds a lot of power.
Yeah, and I think sonically, it's a really cool record. Like when you listen to this record on the headphones, you know, you hear the power and the intensity and the dynamics, you know, working and weaving throughout the song. And I think the production really makes all that shine. It makes all that hard work shine, you know, all the really cool drum stuff that Steve did in the record, all the great guitar leads, all the extra guitar layers, all of that stuff. I mean, sonically, it just sounds amazing with this production. And I'm just so happy everything worked out. I mean, you know, it's very stressful to get to the, you know, working up to this point, you know, and you kind of hope at the end of the day, it sounds, honestly, after a while, you don't even know, because you've been listening to it for months and months, and you just get to a point where you're just so fucking tired of hearing it, you know, and it's like, I can't even listen to these songs anymore. You listen so damn critically, you know, day after day after day, you know, for hours and hours. So it's nice to be past that now and at a point where I can listen to the songs and enjoy them now and not be critical anymore, you know, and I'm just happy that the feedback is positive. So
how much of a game plan do you have vocally coming into a record? Do you outline a lot of things beforehand before getting into the studio?
I try. For me, it's a weird process, and Bob knows this, and Bob understands it completely. I need to have all the songs completed musically before I could really fully dive into the lyrics, you know. So what I did for this record, we had a bunch of songs, like I said early on. And when the pandemic first started at the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic even started, I started writing down ideas. Nothing crazy. I mean, I work in a very weird, abstract way. I'll have a weird concept or idea and I'll write it down. Sometimes I'll have a line or a title or just something that I thought of or I read, you know, a news article or something that strikes me as being very, you know, very unique. And I'll just, you know, and I just write that stuff down. I had notes and notes and notes, pages of notes in my phone that I compiled over the last like 2 years. honestly, a lot of that stuff may never even get used, but it's a starting point, and it helps me, so when I go through and I sift through all these ideas and I start kind of fleshing out the songs, once they're done, I kind of try to put ideas to the music. A good example is the song Apostle. I had a concept, an idea for that song. And it's actually a concept we had back in the 80s, during the demo days. It's a song we almost wrote back then, but we didn't write, because it wasn't good, back then. So we decided not to write it. But now I revisited that idea, that concept, because I really wanted to write about that. And I had the idea and the concept, and I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't have the music until Bob completed Apostle. When Apostle was finished, when the music for that song was done, I knew immediately. I said, okay, this is the song I've been waiting for this concept. So, I know it probably sounds weird, but that's just how it is, for me. And Bob totally gets it. And when Bob heard it, he's like, I understand. He's like, totally. He's like, this works perfectly for this song. So anyway, just my madness and how I approach the whole process. And then once we have a lot of the ideas and concepts fleshed out, I'll start fleshing out the songs, and I'll start writing lyrics and trying to get ideas and try to put them in the context of the songs. And then I'll share those with Bob, and we'll share our ideas, and then he'll add his ideas, And the cool thing about the way we do it now is that we both share the same vision, but we come at it from different perspectives, so it really, I think, allows for the songs lyrically to be I think more well-rounded and more mature, and I think lyrically, the lyrics on this record to me are some of my favorite. I think Bob had so many great ideas and so many great lines that he threw in there, and he kind of took some of the stuff that I did and he reworked it and made it sound better. So I think it's a strong album lyrically. It doesn't really we don't mince words. We get right to the point with a lot of these songs, and I think the ideas are there. I think our fans will have a good time trying to kind of read through these lyrics and understand what they mean, and they'll come up with their own ideas, of course. And that's the fun part, I think, for me. As someone who enjoys lyrics, I always love to read lyrics and imagine what they're saying and what they're about and what they mean. And we decided for this record that we were going to kind of try to keep it more ambiguous, as far as like not guiding the fans by their hands and say, here's what the song's about. I want our fans to read these lyrics and understand them for themselves and come up with their own
that's food
ideas.
feeding us.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I got one last question for you. I mean, it's undeniable the impact that Immolation has had in death metal, in the history of the genre, in the New York death metal sound. It's undeniable. Iconic band. How do you see the impact that the band is going to have in the future to new generations, to new fans that perhaps will discover the band through this record?
Hey, listen, at the end of the day, we don't overthink it. I mean, we don't think ahead that far. I mean, right now we're at a point where we're very happy that we created an album that we're happy with. And so far you guys seem to be happy with. So I'll take that as a win right now. You know what I'm saying? As far as, what happens down the road and all that legacy nonsense, I don't know about that. I don't really think too much about that. I mean, of course, it means a lot to me when I hear a younger band say, hey, Immolation was a huge inspiration on my playing, on my songwriting or whatever. And I that's a huge compliment, man. And it's so awesome to hear. We've never approached what we do that way. This has always been something fun for us and something that allows us to, I guess, release all that energy we have inside in a creative way. And we've always really enjoyed doing this, the whole process, from start to finish, and how it impacts, future generations of death metal fans and listeners and musicians. I guess, you know, that remains to be seen. But, you know, I'm just glad at this point we're still relevant, you know, after 34 years or so. I'm still glad that we're relevant in a sense, and that people still know who we are, and people still come out to see us, and people still talk about us. I mean, that to me means everything. You know, we haven't disappeared into obscurity, you know. So I'm happy with that. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine. I'm just glad people still listen to the music and still enjoy what we do. Then that's the point.
Well, and this album is going to get everybody listening to it and everybody talking about it, because it's a phenomenal record. Off the record, I told you, and I'm going to say it now, best death metal album that I've heard in the last 5 years, maybe even longer. It's just a phenomenal album from start to finish. So powerful, so dark, so strong. You guys did a phenomenal job with this record.
Thank you so much, man. I can't tell you how much that means. Like I said, this has been, you know, part of our lives and part of our souls now for a couple of years now. So now that it's finally out there, to hear that means a lot, man. And it's, I will absolutely share that with the other guys, because that kind of drives us these days. You know, it's like, oh, cool. You know, another person likes it. That's awesome.
There's going to be plenty. You're not going to have anything to worry about with this record. You guys are going to get tons of love as far as this album is concerned. Ross, thank you very much for your time today, man. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the channel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro, so much for taking the time. It was a great interview. I enjoyed talking with you, man. Thank you so much. Hope to meet you on the road.
Yeah, we'll see you on the road. Take care. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too, man. Happy and healthy.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.